back to the Learning Clinic on CKLU 96.7 FM. I'm your host, Bob Kerwin, and we are about to go into our second session this afternoon with Ontario Liberal candidate James Tregonning, who is running in the Nickel Belt riding. For those of you who tuned in at 12 o'clock, we had Faraz Jelanis, who is running under the NDP banner. And at 2 o'clock, we have Mark Blay coming in. He's running for the Ontario PC in Nickel Belt. And unfortunately, Heather Dahlstrom was not able to make it. She's starting a new job today. But we have Casey Lalonde, who's coming in to give people a rundown on the Green Party platform. In keeping with the theme of the Learning Clinic, all the way through the municipal campaign and provincial campaign, our goal is to allow the guests to express the platform and discuss the issues from an educational standpoint, so that we're trying to help people understand better the concepts behind the parties rather than to get into the debate aspect. May not be as exciting as a debate, but I think an informed voter is a good voter, and that's basically what we're looking at. So James, welcome back to CKLU.
Thank you, Robert. It's great to be back.
Yeah. And I understand you've been, this is the second time here on this show, and I know you've been at least once on another show in the schedule with CKLU. And right now, since we're in the home stretch, we're running right down, we don't have too many days left. Hopefully the weather is going to stay like this for the rest of the week, and you can get everything done you have to get done. But if we're going to take a look at the Liberal package, and we've heard so much in the media, or the national media, the provincial media, the local, we've heard so much about what this party wants and what this party wants. All I want to do is, in the next 30 or 40 minutes, is let's put a wrapping around what the Liberal package is, and what James Tregonning and the Liberal Party basically stands for. What are the main, I guess, core issues that we're dealing with here in this round? Sound good?
Sounds great.
So shoot, let's start. What do you think is rising up as one of the number one issues?
Well, energy costs, definitely. You know, when I'm knocking on doors, I'm not hearing about gas plants and scandals. I'm hearing about real issues that touch people's lives. I'm talking electricity costs. And, you know, there's not a whole heck of a lot that any party can do. I mean, you look at the NDP and their promises. They said they would eliminate the HST, which we all know they can't do without the federal government saying, shaking hands with them on that, and I don't see that ever happening. But according to the NDP crystal ball, they think this is going to happen in 2015, but that's besides the point, because I can't predict the future. They're going to eliminate the debt reduction charge and the HST, which would translate to about $200 a year in savings. That's less than 20 bucks off your electric bill per month. That's not a whole heck of a lot. We're planning on reducing the debt reduction charge, eliminating it completely, which again is not a lot of savings per month. It is, but it doesn't translate to a lot of savings. The bottom line here is we need to do a better job in creating different avenues. So the solar farm in Valcarron, for example, which was now operational, which is plugged into the grid.
That's the one between the Hammer and Cape Row, right?
That's exactly right. And I was lucky enough to have a tour of that place, and it's immense, it's huge. It's creating 10 megawatts of energy, it's branched into the grid right now, it's plugged in, and it's operational, it's lighting lights as we speak. We need to do more of that. We need to tap into our renewable energy sources in order to start reducing how energy is made. If we can find ways to increase energy sources by renewable energy, bills will go down. Will it happen tomorrow? No. But will it happen? Yes, eventually. So we have to plan for the future. We understand that. The Liberals started the solar farm. The NDP voted against that. But yet we still started it, and it's creating jobs right here in Nickel Belt. We need to do more of that. We've got 2 micro farms out in Albin We have some little micros, you know, people's backyards, that type of thing, going up as we speak, but we need to do a better job of that. So yes, that is something that the Liberals are going to be working on. One of the things that is near and dear to my heart is renewable energy sources, and I'd like to bring more of that and more jobs associated with those endeavors right here in Nickel Belt. We have the land to do it, let's utilize it.
Now, is that including the windmill?
I would like to see that happen. When I was in the government, we started a wind farm. That was one of the first things that Dalton McGuinty did. It came into there was a lot of debate about it, because it was in a farmer's field, it was near residential areas, there's a lot of humming, there's a lot of noise that go along with wind generation. To do it again, I would look at ways of reducing the cost. One of the ways to reduce those costs is not having storage. We don't need to have battery packs. We can plug directly into the grid without storing. The solar farm in Valcarron is a perfect example of that. There's no storage. Anything that's generated is generated right into the grid. They have these, what they call MV houses, that basically change the AC to DC power, and then that goes through the grid. So there's absolutely no storage mechanisms. There's no battery packs. There's no big homes that have all of these battery packs in them. It's all plugged right into the grid. And we need to do more of that. So wind, yes. Where I would locate that, definitely away from residential. And we've got a lot of crown land behind Cape Real that could be used. That would be the perfect spot for it.
Yeah, that's good. So energy is obviously, yes, it's a big issue. And it probably always has and always will be.
Yeah, definitely.
So, what's another one?
You know, some of my platform issues were seniors and their care. Knocking on doors, that's definitely an issue. Home care is an issue. But during a debate one day, I was explaining to people that healthcare is one of the systems that's always in flux. It's always continuously evolving because the people's needs are changing. So right now, the baby boomers are coming to the age where they want to stay at their homes longer. They don't want to go into residential care. If they can do it, they want to stay there. They should be able to have that right, and they should be able to do it. We agree. We're going to be putting more into PSWs, we're going to be putting more into home care. But we have to evaluate home care. What does that mean? What does that beast look like? We need to know that in order to match the best dollar amount to the right service.
So each home is its own unit then?
Each home has their own, each person, each patient has their own needs. And we have to be able to find the magic wand, if you will, that will look at the whole gamut of services and best match those services to a program. It's a challenge.
And that seems to be the direction that most health care is moving now, aren't they? They're starting to move more into the community and more into making people more autonomous for their own care.
Absolutely.
And trying to get away from the institutionalization aspect, which
Absolutely.
is very expensive. So,
Absolutely.
so I mean, it is a trend that I guess it's interesting when you talk about this is what the people want. So it's not necessarily the institutions that have been starting the trend. They may be responding to what their patients have been looking for.
And that's a challenge for every government. I mean, when I was in government, it's one thing to do policy, it's one thing to sit behind a desk and read the performance measures and evaluate your policy, is it working, is it not, based on all these wonderful performance measures. That's one thing. The hard thing is to evaluate it. The hard thing is to find out what exactly the people need. And I'll give you an example. What happens now may not happen in 20 years. Once the baby boomers are no longer, their needs are no longer going to be in the system. Will we need all of these home care issues 20, 30, 40, 50 years from now? That's a question that needs to be answered 20, 40, or 50 years from now. But still, we need to plan for it.
That's David Foote's next book.
Well, yeah, pretty much. But we need to make that planning process. We need to have that in place to make sure, because what happens is, if we put all this money into home care now and then it's not needed, let's say 50 or 60 years from now, there has to be a mechanism where that program can be either brought into a different program, amalgamated to another one, or moved into something else that healthcare needs at that time. Like, we don't have crystal balls, we don't have tarot card readings in the Liberal Party. The NDP seem to have it, but we don't. And we need to know exactly what's going on now at the present time in order to plan for the present time, keeping in mind that the future is just around the corner.
Yeah. And good luck. I have trouble predicting next week.
Well,
But you gotta plan for it, and I see on a bigger scale, yeah, because it takes a long time to turn a ship.
Yeah,
And,
it does.
I don't think there's too many bigger ships around in our healthcare system.
50, I think it's up to 53 billion right now. It's a little bit higher than the middle mark.
Pretty big. I guess, everybody always talks about education because it's one of the other big ticket items. You know, energy, education, and healthcare. Much in the platform dealing with health education?
Oh, there's
How's that for a silly question?
There's a lot going on in education because most of our job strategies are focused around skill development and knowledge building. We're going to be investing in 60,000 new post-secondary spots. This is first and foremost.
It's a lot of buildings too, isn't it?
It's a lot of buildings, yeah. The capital is definitely going to be looked at, and it is already costed out. But the issue here is, in order to sustain good paying jobs for the future, you have to have the skills and knowledge. And we're investing in that skills and knowledge. But interestingly enough, when I'm knocking on doors, it's not education. People aren't talking about education. What people are talking about is Bill 115 still. Some of the teachers are really upset about Bill 115. Well, Bill 115 is no more. It was rescinded. It was a mistake, number one. It was rescinded. And Bill 122 has put safeguards in place to make sure that Bill 115 never happens again. And I'm not quite sure that information has been brought forward to the teachers, because they're still stuck in Bill 115. I mean, there's been a lot of progress since that bill was rescinded. There's been a tremendous amount of negotiations with the unions, with the teachers' unions on all levels, IEFO, OECTA, OSSTF. A lot of these unions have had their input into Bill 122. There has been amendments that have been put forward by the unions that were accepted by government, including the ministerial rights. These issues have been resolved. But yet, for some reason, at the door, it's still an issue. And I have a little bit of a concern with that, because it shows that people aren't getting the right information, or they're buying into the hype of the other parties.
Yeah, and I guess it doesn't take much for a person to think back to Bill 115. I just mentioned 115. I know as a trustee, I believe, I forgot about it as soon as it happened, but I believe it was 179 that reformed the Education Act and established the roles and responsibilities of trustees and directors and so on. And there were a lot of changes with Bill 179. People still refer to Bill 179, although it was an act to amend the Education Act, and basically Bill 179 is gone, and we have the Education Act amended by Bill 179. But people still refer to Bill 179, just like they refer to Bill 115, and it's not there.
And it's not there. It doesn't exist anymore. Exactly.
So,
you know, when I was in education, I actually had the opportunity to be seconded to the Ministry of Education for a little over a year. And one of my jobs was to evaluate the redundancy of the regulations of the Education Act. I mean, there were some regulations in there that said the teacher had to stop teaching every 15 minutes to stock the coal, stock the coal in the oven.
That must have kept you busy 24/7 for a year.
Yes, it certainly did. But we managed to eliminate a lot of these, redundant regulations.
Things that people ignored for years and nobody paid any attention,
well,
but they were still in the books.
But they were still in the books, and that's the thing that needs to happen, right? With all legislation. I mean, legislation is good, but legislation has to be looked at, because legislation is a high-end policy, if you will, and if you're not continuously looking at it, if the regulations are actually meeting the needs of the people, then that particular point of legislation is failing, and you need to rescind it or change it or amalgamate it into others.
So you're satisfied with where education's going right now in elementary and secondary? And
I believe that the Liberal platform is the best platform. The full day kindergarten, for example, which is great. A lot of people love that. the support for educational assistance, the integration, more integration of special needs in the classroom, that's important as well. I think we can do a better job on mental health and addictions, and I think that needs to be discussed in caucus, and I hope to be in caucus. I hope that people will put their support behind me so that my voice can actually be at the table, if you will, of government. I think there's more power in having a voice at the table of government within caucus so that decisions can be made there, than instead of making a decision and being yelled at from across the opposition. You know, I think there's more power in debating in caucus than there is having the opposition members voice their concerns after the decision is made.
One of the things I mentioned to Franz when she was in here before you was that as a member of Nickelbelt, as a resident of Nickelbelt, I've been really quite proud of the fact that we can look at all the candidates in the Nickelbelt riding, and I can say that it hasn't been a personality issue with the Nickelbelt riding. It's been very much about the issues and about discussing, but there hasn't been any of the trying to, you know, discredit any of the candidates. It's really been good. But we're like a little island in that respect, because it seems like everywhere you turn around, there's an attack, there's an attack, there's an attack. And as Franz said, unfortunately, those attack ads work. Psychologically, they work on the voters. It's not nice. It's actually disgusting, but it works. How are you dealing with some of the attacks that are being made on the provincial leaders, and dealing with those when you're talking to the people in Nickelbelt?
Well, you know, that comes up at the doors.
Mm-hmm.
And it's an important discussion to have, but when you have less than a minute with somebody at a door, you can't really get into it.
I know.
And that's sad, because I'd love to spend hours talking to one house, but unfortunately I have a whole street to do. You know, when I see attack ads, if they're done right, they're effective. If they're done wrong, they turn people off. And I'll give you an example. When I see the NDP's ads about corruption, well, I don't see the corruption. I'm in the Liberal government. I understand where Kathleen Wynne is going. I understand where their leadership is moving. This corruption, maybe it existed prior, I don't know. I don't have that knowledge. So to me, that's an untruth, and that turns me off. When I look at Hudak saying, we're going to get Ontario working, but he leaves out the fact that, well, we're also going to fire 100,000 different people. That turns me off, because you're not providing the full story. You're just saying we're going to get Ontario working. Oh yeah, but if we didn't do a good job in getting the information out, you wouldn't know that they're going to fire 100,000 people. Then you look at the Liberal ads, and the Liberal ads talk about a whole bunch of things, but the one thing I liked about Kathleen is it wasn't a personal attack. It was definitely on issues. You know, and then if you look carefully at the bottom tagline of her ads, you'll see the source, where she mentions the NDP said this or the PC said this. It mentions the white papers, it mentions the vote counts. So what she's doing is she's doing politics a little bit different. She's sticking to the facts. When you look at my attack ads, because I do have what would be called attack ads with MCTV out there, my attack ads are not against the NDP, they're not against the PCs. It basically says, I'm committed to bringing renewable energy here to Nickelbelt. I'm also committed to bringing these jobs here to Nickelbelt. Those are considered attack ads. Well, you know, Bob, I gotta say I disagree with that.
Well,
that's not an attack ad.
You're not attacking the personality that you're running against. You're not attacking Franz or Mark or Heather as a person.
No, not at all.
I mean, we all understand at the provincial and federal level, there are platforms, and there are party platforms.
Yeah.
And I guess if you're gonna run, you better believe in them all, because if there's any you don't believe in, people are gonna be able to see through it.
But you gotta pick the best one, and at the debate, I think the debate, it was so, it was horrible to see the amount of people that were at the debate. There should have been like hundreds of people there, and there was less than 50 people in the audience itself, and I find that horrible. I think more people need to be engaged, and That's my message in this particular election is let's start talking politics. Let's get engaged.
I think though, and I know that you're a technology person, I really do think that the number of people that are physically in the room is not reflective of the number of people who actually watched or have seen the
Agreed.
debate.
Agreed.
And I think because of the nature of the job and the nature of the jobs people have, and the fact that soccer season's here and it was such a beautiful day in it, I really do think that a lot of people either watched bits and pieces of it, or because it was streamed and taped, it's so easy on the computer now to pause it while you have to go and put the kids to bed, that I think I think a lot of people did see these debates.
I agree, but we need to do a better job at bringing people in.
Bringing people to
You know,
the
because if you're in the watching it is one thing,
yeah.
but if you're there and you're able to ask a question, you're able to put your 10 cents in by writing on that question on that page, and then having the candidates answer your question right then and there. That's important to me.
Yeah.
You know, that's where it is, because you don't get that at home. You don't get that with the technology.
No.
You don't get the personal contact or the interaction. You don't get the eye contact with the candidate
Yeah.
when you're you know sitting at your sitting at home. You don't have that. You can't go up and shake the candidate's hand at the end of the day or at the end of the debate.
Yeah.
That's important. It's
Yeah.
really important, and I think more people need to become more engaged with that. Don't get me wrong, the technology is wonderful.
Yeah.
But you're missing that personal contact when you're not coming out. And we need to do a better job at reaching out. And that was one of the things that I said in my closing statements at the debate, which I stand behind. We need to start talking politics at the supper table. We need to start engaging more people. You know, talk about things at restaurants and get people interested in politics again. I had a conversation with a police officer the other day where I was talking to him about how we need to get engaged. And, you know, he was a young guy, he was probably in his 20s. And I said, one of the problems that I see is that the younger generation, your generation, aren't engaged. They don't want to have that spirited discussion. Like, I have great conversations with senior citizens, but I don't have that great conversations with 20-year-olds because they turn their back and they walk away because they're just not interested. And that kind of scares me, knowing that the senior citizens are only going to be around for maybe 20 or 30 more years, and who's going to be voting after that if people are disengaged? Your 20-year-olds who are then going to be 40 and 50, they're the people who are going to be voting. But there's a whole disengagement happening, and I wonder what causes that. What I vowed to do in this election is not sling mud at any one of my colleagues. I don't call them opponents, I call them colleagues. We're all competing, if you will, for one seat, because there's only one seat in Nickel Belt.
Yeah.
But France is a good personal friend, and I would never, ever, ever insult or attack Francheville in any shape, way, or form. Never would I do something like that. Mark, I just got to know. Heather, I've just gotten to know. I have no issues with them. I think they are great people, and I respect them for putting their names forward. I mean, just by putting your name forward in a provincial election is something.
Yep.
And that commands my respect right then and there.
Yep. You're offering a choice.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And my platform, or my particular point of view, not my platform, but my particular point of view is it's about growth and progress. Look at the platforms, get engaged, ask your candidates questions, find out what the facts are,
Yeah.
and then make your choice.
Let's talk about job growth and development. And like I know education is important in creating jobs, and like are there any long-term goals
Yep.
that you've got with job
Well,
growth?
you've got to look at the whole economic situation, right? So let's go through just very quickly the spectrum, if you will, of economic issues for the platforms. You have the PCs over on the right side of the world that are basically saying we're going to lower corporate taxes, which means that we're going to bring companies back to Ontario. Okay, well that's wonderful if you're in an economic climate that it could be prosperous. But in this particular case, in reality, we're making product here in Ontario, nobody's buying it. So why would we want to bring a company into Ontario that's going to make all this wonderful product that they're going to have to store in a warehouse because nobody's buying it? Then you go over to way over on the other side of the spectrum, the NDP side, over on the left, and they're saying we're going to increase corporate taxes because they can afford it. The corporations can afford it. We're also going to raise minimum wage to $14 because the corporations can afford it. But we all know your small businesses and your medium-sized businesses will not be able to sustain that increase in taxes and that increases in payouts in terms of salaries. A lot of the small and medium businesses will be closing. But again, they're trying to bring people in to make more product. Well, the Liberals, we're looking at, okay, we understand the economic environment very well. We understand that lowering taxes is not going to be effective because of the economic climate. We understand that raising taxes is going to throw us into a huge recession. Where's the balance point? Well, the Liberals, to me, have the balance point because what we want to do is we want to invest in jobs and skill training and knowledge training to help people sell their product. We want to get Ontario selling, if you will. Because if you don't sell your product, you're not making any profit, and if you're not making any profit, your economy is at a standstill. So yes, we've got, and at the debate I used the term widgets. I was criticized because that was an old term, but I guess I'm old. But as we're making all these widgets and we can't sell the widgets, right? We have to store them in warehouses. Well, that can only happen to a certain extent before we have to sell out. What we want to do is start selling the widgets. We want people in place with jobs that are trained, that understand the process, that understand the programs, that understand the product in order to push the product out of the warehouses. That's what our job strategy is all about. It's going to sell our widgets. And to me, that's the right answer for this economy. We're not going to tailspin it one way. We're not going to fishtail it the other. We're going right down the middle in a safe approach. And that is Kathleen's plan in terms of her safe hands that we've heard about. That's the safe hands we need. We can't start making reckless decisions one way or the other. We have to keep going up the middle. Does it take time? Yes. I think the US economy is a perfect example of how it took a long time with economic stimulus packages in place, with all the fiscal cliff issues that we've heard about in the past, but yet their economy is now starting to grow. People are starting to buy the widgets. That's where Ontario needs to grow. Slow and sure will we make it. And we will make it, but we can't start making reckless decisions to throw that into a tailspin.
Okay. I know infrastructure investment is huge in terms of the needs of municipalities and I guess even the City of Toronto with their subway systems and everything. But is there anything specific in the platform with the Liberals about the infrastructure investments throughout the province?
Well, there's $29 billion that the NDP just didn't support in our budget. For infrastructure spending, and
So
there's
those are
14
grants to municipalities.
Yep. And there's $14 billion earmarked for Northern Ontario. Okay, I'm not sure if people knew that, but out of the $29 billion, 14 is for Northern Ontario. Now, the Liberal government understands clearly that the North is not going to be paying for Southern transportation issues.
Okay.
So that $14 billion is earmarked to help with Northern transportation infrastructure issues. Down south, they need subways. Up here, do we need subways? Probably not. It would probably cost more than $14 billion to set up a subway system between here and North
rock here.
Yeah, exactly. But what we need here are better roads, because that's our subway system. Our roads are our transportation. That is how we commute back and forth to work. You know, when I see Maley Drive, and Maley Drive is an interesting beast in itself because half of it belongs to Nickel Belt. On the other side of Maley Drive, where you go up Old Falcon Bridge Road, that's all Nickel Belt folks. And the only way that those people get home every day is by using Maley Drive. So as Maley Drive is as much a Sudbury issue, it's as much a Nickel Belt issue, because people in Nickel Belt are affected by Maley Drive daily. Maley Drive is definitely the infrastructure plume in the chapeau, if you will, of the Liberal plan. Why? Because it shows you local growth and progress.